Good afternoon and welcome to your Learning Part 3 notes. In these notes we'll be learning about operant conditioning. So in the last two notes you've learned about classical conditioning, and I think the biggest point that I want you to take away from these lectures is the difference between the two, because a lot of the test questions and a lot of your knowledge that you'll need to know is be able to read through a situation and figure out whether or not it was classical or operant conditioning. And then later when we're talking about operant conditioning, looking at the types of ratios or fixed ratios or intermittent ratios on punishment and reinforcement. Okay, so they're called reinforcement schedules. You'll need to know those. All right, so let's start out with just talking about our definitions of operant conditioning. So when we're looking at classical conditioning, you're really dependent on something called respondent behavior. So respondent behavior, this right here, this is going to be our classical conditioning. And that is that the behaviors that occur naturally. All right, so when you are trying to classically condition someone to relate to different stimulus and then a response, you're kind of operating under the fact that the respondent will salivate to meat, right? So dogs will salivate to meat, that people will wince when they hear thunder. So respondent behavior, that's classical conditioning, and these are natural behaviors that exist because of a stimulus. In operant conditioning, we're going to talk about reinforcement, so positive and negative. So in operant conditioning, this is when we train or we get behaviors or have operant behaviors because of either introducing a reinforcement, so like giving candy or giving praise, or introducing a punishment, like taking something away. I think the biggest difference with operant conditioning and operant behavior is that those different types of reinforcements can be different depending on the person. For example, you may be motivated to get good grades because you want tickets to a rock concert, whereas someone who likes Justin Bieber would not be motivated to do well so that they could get tickets to that rock concert. All right, so operant conditioning is when you add either a reinforcement or a punishment to shape someone's behavior. All right, so operant behavior means that the behavior operates depending on the environment. Okay, so I'll put little blurbs in there after the little yellow boxes with all the magical information, so that you kind of have more information to write down on that. But really who you need to know, so we talked about some really important people behaviors in the last lectures. Our important psychologist in this lecture is going to be someone named B.F. Skinner. So B.F. Skinner did a lot of experiments using something called a Skinner box. And he was trying to train animals with reinforcement. Okay, so his experiments were based off of this gentleman named Edward Thorndike's law of effect. And before we talk about that, you need to know how important it is that it's a law, because we've talked about theories, but there's very, very few laws in psychology, because a law is a constant, right? It's something that will happen. And we don't have a lot of those in psychology because psychology is a relatively new science. And also psychology is talking about people and animals, and those can be so different. So we don't have a lot of laws. We have a lot of theories, but we don't have a lot of law. So Edward Thorndike's law simply states that rewarded behavior is likely to occur. Rewarded behavior is likely to occur. Okay, so I don't want you to think that reward is necessarily a good thing, right? Because that can be different for different people. But just saying that if behavior is rewarded, that is more likely to occur. If you sneak out at night and you make new friends, right? Then that is your reward. Like, you made new friends. Is sneaking out at night a good thing? No, but it's more likely to happen in the future because you were rewarded for it. Okay. All right. So B.F. Skinner, he built something called a Skinner box, and he did a lot of combinations of behavioral technology, meaning that he tried to combine looking at behavior using technology, and also controlling behavior. So this is the puzzle box here. This is the original, right? So this is a long time ago. And here is, I'll come back to this graph here in a minute, but here is his operant chamber, or something called the Skinner box. So you can remember that the operant chamber has to do with operant conditioning. Okay, so here's what he was trying to do. He was trying to train this rat that every time it pressed the bar, or he was trying to train the rat to press the bar. And in order to do that, every time he pressed the bar, there's a piece of food dispensed, so a little food pellet. Okay, so that's what he was trying to train the rat to do. Press the bar so that you get food. So going back to this graph here, the time it required the box to escape. Oh, this is the puzzle box. I'm sorry, this is not the Skinner box, but this is a different one. This is where they put the rat in a maze, and they were trying to see how long it took them to escape. But also we're trying to give them little food pellets to help them out. So the first time that they tried to escape the puzzle box, it took 240 seconds. All right, and then as time went by, as they learned more and they were rewarded with escaping with food, it took them less and less time, right? So you shaped the behavior of the rat. In this one, they were shaping that pushing down the bar will get you food. And you can kind of think that it followed the same timeline. The first time it took them to push the lever took a long time, but after many times when they started to associate pushing the lever with getting food, it took less time. All right, so shaping is how we change behavior. So we can do this with children, you can do this with animals, but shaping is modifying behavior slowly, all right, over time to get how whatever behavior you're looking for. So you can think of with the rat pushing the bar, each time the rat went close to pushing the bar, they might have gotten a food pellet. All right, and then next time they had to go a little bit further and they got a food pellet. You ignore all other bad behaviors and you only reward the ones that are close to the behavior that you'd like. Okay, so if I'm trying to teach my child how to go to the bathroom, right? So potty training. Every time maybe they went into the bathroom, I would give them like an M&M. Okay, and then every time like maybe you just sat on the toilet, you'd get an M&M. I'm trying to shape them to eventually be potty trained. So these are called successive approximations, meaning successive coming after each other approximations. They're close to the behavior that I want, but not exactly the behavior that I want. All right, and then after a while, the person that's learning, or the child or the animal, is able to discriminate between what gets them a reward and what doesn't. Okay, so they're able to discriminate between the stimulus. This is a lot of work done with pigeons. Super exciting, right? Talk about pigeons. But pigeons that were rewarded for looking or pecking at a certain face. So they're trying to train the pigeon to recognize a certain person. And so at first, they would just get a food pellet for recognizing a face from, like, I don't know, a flower. Like, good job, you picked out the face. And then they would only get rewarded for maybe picking out a man's face. So every time they picked at a woman's face, they didn't get rewarded, right? So then it was a man's. And then it got narrowed down to like the one person that they wanted the pigeon to be able to recognize, right? So that in this case, the pigeon was discriminating between the faces. So this discriminative stimulus is whatever the person or the animal learning is trying to discriminate between. This is a rewarding behavior bad. So this is great. I'll have to wake up crying in the middle of the night more often. So in this case, the child was rewarded for getting up in the middle of the night by being able to sleep with his parents. All right. Okay, so let's talk about types of reinforcement. So there's two different types of reinforcement. You can have positive and negative. Now, I want you to get rid of, I think we've talked about this before with correlation. All your thoughts about what means with positive and negative mean. All that positive and negative mean in this case is if it's positive, that means there's something added to the situation. And if it's negative, there's something taken away from the situation. Okay, so it's not a good or a bad thing, positive and negative. It just means positive means added, negative means taken away. Okay, so if I want to increase behavior, I use reinforcements. All right, now they can be positive or negative. So a positive reinforcement is going to add a desirable stimulus, like example, giving a hug or receiving a paycheck. So I worked really hard and then I got paid. That is a positive reinforcement because something was added to my situation. Versus a negative reinforcement is when you remove an adverse stimulation. So I go to I don't fasten my seatbelt, right? And that little annoying beep, 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 beep light comes on. So I fasten my seatbelt and the light goes away. So that was the reinforcement, is that the beeping sound went away. So I didn't like that beeping sound. I put on my seatbelt and then it goes away. So negative, there's something removed from the situation. Okay? Negative removed, positive means add. Types of reinforcers, and then we'll talk about reinforcement schedules in the next notes. So type of reinforcers, you have your primary and then your conditioned, which is your secondary. We talked about that a little bit with classical. So my primary reinforcement is exactly like what you get right away, right? So the food pellet. But remember we talked about with classical with the Pavlov's dogs, they started to associate not just the bell but the light going on. So they would look at the light was like its secondary reinforcer. That's the same thing here with the conditioned reinforcer. So the thing that they might get like associate with being reinforced. So the rat, when going to push the food pellet, maybe the light comes on as it pushes the food or the food bar, and then they would associate the light with the food as well. So that's the secondary reinforcer. And then what we're going to talk about in our next lectures, types of reinforcement schedules. So there's different ways that behavior can be modified on different schedules. There'll be immediate and then delayed reinforcers. So I can immediately reward or punish the behavior that's going on, or I can have a delayed reinforcer. So immediate would mean like child does something, they get it right away. Versus a delayed reinforcer is like your paycheck. I worked for a whole month and then I get a paycheck. All right, so immediate means right away, delayed means over time. So in our next notes, we'll talk about the different types of schedules that are associated with reinforcement.